All students are facing new challenges and opportunities during this time of COVID-19. Quarantines and transitions back to in-person classes. These challenges are changing as we navigate going back to schools. This webinar has been developed to help provide guidance to schools about accessibility for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. You may be a teacher for students who are deaf and hard of hearing, ASL interpreter, transliterator, special education teacher, general education teacher who works with interpreters, audiologist, or other school staff. This webinar will provide you with an outline of some problems students who are deaf and hard of hearing will experience, as well as some possible solutions about how to support students at success. Solutions continue to be explored and are evolving. All of the people you see in this webinar are either deaf or hard of hearing themselves and are sharing lived experiences.
What goes through your mind when you're thinking about returning to classes and study classes in the fall, and teachers or interpreters might be wearing masks?
So I think it'll be much more mentally exhausting to understand a teacher or interpreter you have when they're like facial expressions or even just the spoken language without being able to see their facial expression or mouth to lip read. And there will be a much greater potential for the loss of information or misunderstanding, which will make testing harder and even just retaining information, because you can get the same information 4 different ways and now you don't know which one of them is right and which one's wrong. So you'll have to repeat the same stuff over and over, which will take much more mental exhaustion, even just physical exhaustion from you to try and repeatedly learn the same thing.
If someone is wearing a mask, a face mask, and they're signing an ASL, what information is missing?
I guess what you're missing out of maybe is the facial expression and the mouth movements that you would use in ASL.
And then what challenges do you expect when you use interpreter services in classes in the fall if you are going to be meeting in person?
I'm assuming that the interpreters probably won't wear masks. If they do, it'll be hard.
It's how are you preparing yourself emotionally to return to in-person classes?
For me, I personally think it'll be, because we have been out of the classroom for so long, it'll be a little overwhelming feeling to be around that many people again for just that extended amount of time. But feelings of just anxiety and exhaustion and worry about getting the information and getting it right, not remembering the wrong things or having misunderstanding, or it can be awkward even before then to ask for so much repetition of the stuff to make sure that you get it right. And so now maybe having to ask for even more, having to ask for it in a different way, preparing yourself for questions to ask right away if you don't get it. How am I going to ask them to say it? Am I going to ask them to say it slower? Am I going to ask them to use different words? Am I going to ask them to write it down? Before I go to school, am I going to ask for an interpreter or captioning? Or am I going to talk to my teachers a week before class that they're going to give me notes before class every day? Or find a friend in my class and buddy up with them so that they can give me notes after class. Just having a mental game plan for how you're going to get the information that you either misunderstood or that you didn't get in the class.
And just make sure that you feel confident. And, make sure that you're speaking very clearly.
Do you wear a mask? And if you're wearing a mask, and you have hearing aids or you have cochlear implant processors, do you find wearing a mask uncomfortable physically because of the processor or because of the hearing aid? Especially if you imagine having to wear them all day.
I wear one hearing aid and one implant. And with the mask I have, is just a basic doctor's mask where it goes behind your ear. And I find with my implant, that one doesn't bother me because there's nothing really sitting in front of it. You just have a hook. But with my hearing aid, it can get caught on the wire, or it can get start pushing it around or wiggling it, which can make it whistle if it moves my ear mold out a little bit. So you have to either very carefully put on your mask after you put them on, or you have to put on your mask and then put on your hearing aid and implant. and then you just have to leave it. You can't move it, you can't really touch it. And if it starts like bugging you behind your ear, you can't take it off because you're in public. But I guess the best thing would just be to make sure you have one that fits you. Don't have like a really tight mask because then it'll pull on your ears more, and that can mess with the fitting of your hearing aid or implant. And so, because my mom made ours, so mine like fits me. But if you go and buy one, I'd probably say buy one that ties behind your head or like have a bandana, because then it won't move anything around and you'll still have the access to language that you need.
I'm also thinking about like FM systems. Have you used an FM system with a mask before, Paige?
I never got to try it with my FM system, but I do like when teachers wear it upside down so the microphone is against their shirt, or if they cover their mouth really quickly while they're talking, it can make it very muffled and then it's hard to understand. So I would imagine with a mask and an FM system, it would just sound the exact same as how I would get it, very muffled, very distorted. Then you'd be better off having things written out for you or captioned or interpreted rather than hearing it through your hearing aid through your FM system.
What are some things that you would want a teacher of deaf hard of hearing to tell your mainstream or your general education teachers to make things more smooth for you if you were a student going back to school in person?
For me, I would ask that the teacher inform the general ed teachers that, making sure the videos are captioned. They have to have a plan in the curriculum to make sure those videos are captured, and also how the videos are shown. If the kids are wearing a mask, or if it's hard to understand the emotions within the environment too, that can be very stressful in the environment. If there's breakdowns or anything, that may be the reason why, and hopefully try to ask them to please, set up some good environmental classrooms to help smooth out some of those frustrations, to help them understand a little bit better.
There's a lot of jargon and a lot of new vocabulary that you might encounter. So what are some things that teachers of deaf hard of hearing might be thinking about to help make the vocabulary clearer for students in classes?
In the deaf and hard of hearing classrooms, or maybe in the regular classrooms, you can always have the notes in the board or the key words for the day written up on the board. Similar to like a syllabus, if there's abbreviations there, definitions and examples on how to use that in a sentence. One way that you could give that information for some of the new vocabulary words that would be coming up in class.
I know for me, even though I had just like a slight hearing loss when I was younger with women, and I had mostly female teacher my whole life, it was hard to learn to read even when I could see your lips because they didn't want you looking at them. They wanted you looking at your book. So if they have a mask on and you're looking at your book, it's going to be even harder to understand them and hear what the words are. So having someone like a paraprofessional directly with them to follow along in the book with them, to like point out the words that they're looking at, or using more visual like picture cues with them. Like if you are learning how to write dog, having a picture of a dog. If you're learning how to write train, having a picture of a train. Finding ways to teach students without needing to understand how to read the words, having more of a visual.
I'm trying to remember from my past how I learned to read through the deaf teacher who was teaching me. A lot of it was one-on-one. So for people who are teaching in mainstream classes, I think, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is that they maybe need to be learning the ABCs and ASL and being able to help assist with finger spelling to make it clear.
For me, because they thought I just had a hard time reading, I think no one really realized like why I couldn't understand or hear people. You were put into like a smaller group and you went to a different room to learn to read, so it was less people and more one-on-one with the teacher, even if it was just a few students. So maybe for everyone in the class, not even, so the deaf and hard of hearing kids, especially if they're younger, you don't want them to feel singled out or like there's something wrong with them, because there's nothing wrong with them. They're totally capable of everything. They just need to have the access to it. Putting people in smaller groups to learn their information and putting them in smaller groups to learn to read, having a more direct conversation with their teacher, having our paraprofessional go with them into that group to follow the words with them, I think would be beneficial for them.
What are some recommendations that you have for those interpreters to make sure that the interpreting is clear and that it is accessible?
I think first of all is, speaking to the students that they'll be interpreting for, because every one of the students is different with their preferences, obviously, and just making sure that all the things that they say, in case they need to do lip reading also, just making sure it's you have a clear mask for that in that instance for the student. So I would ask the students that they're being interpreted for if they prefer ASL or like what their language preference is. If it's more of an ESL for English classes, you use that. If it's another method, use that.
What are some suggestions or ideas that you would recommend to teachers and schools as they prepare for the fall to make sure that students who are deaf or hard of hearing have access?
So I would tell the teachers to use more gestures and body language, like pointing things out physically or writing them out. Make sure there's captioning available for as many outlets as possible, whether it's a video, if you have someone come in for an interview or a discussion, and try and get an interpreter or captioning available for students so that they can have access to all language in the classroom.
So I think we're going to wrap it up here, and I really appreciate all of the information that you've shared for teachers of deaf, hard of hearing, and IEP managers, interpreters, transliterators, and even thinking about these things for real-time caption providers as well. And I'm hoping that they can look at this information and really kind of learn from you because you have lived experiences and help them prepare for a better transition to in-person classes. So thank you for taking the time to meet with me.